So, good evening, everyone. It's 7 p.m. I'd like to call this gathering to order. Hey. Hey. Ooh, it looks that from here, this looks good, doesn't it? Looking at you all sitting here. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Melanie Denise Cunningham, and I work in the campus ministry office as Director of Multicultural Outreach and Engagement. And this is a collaboration of campus ministry with Meant to Live and the Wild Hope Center, specifically Sergia Hay. Hey, Sergia. Sergia, mwah. Give Sergia a hand, please. As you all know, we've been talking very strategically, very much from the heart, just deeply here at PLU about equity and inclusion and diversity and all of those topics for several years. And folks from different identities have different concerns and thoughts. And so I'm very connected with the Black community in Tacoma and around, and I talk a lot with Black students about what their concerns are on campus. And we all know that if we're going to move forward in any way, you have to look back to see from which you've come and really examine those things that worked well, acknowledge those things that didn't, collaborate on how we move forward. So tonight, when Sergi and I were talking this summer about what we could do meaningfully for the campus, but also to recognize Black students as a viable part of this campus and the history of Black students on this campus, we thought we would bring students that pioneered on this campus years ago to bring some clarity. And this all surfaced when Nayani Watts, class of 2019, Nay, hey, where you at? There's Nay. Nayani worked in the campus ministry office 2 years ago now, and she was new to PLU, came from Las Vegas and curious about the history of Black folks on this campus. And I just suggested, Nayani, why don't you research that? And so what is in the back, and I hope that some of you all get a chance to see, is Nayani's research work on display. She spent a lot of time in our archives and in the library and looking up things, the MAST, and just deeply researching the Black student impact at PLU. And some of your pictures are back there on the board for sure.
They won't be when I leave.
And what also became evident is that there's some gaps in our history that we don't know about and really want to know about, because some significant change happened on this campus because of Black student advocacy. And so that's what got us to thinking, how do we connect our history? And then talking with Sergia, Meant to Live. So we just put this together. And it is just amazing to welcome you all back. Welcome home.
Thank you.
Welcome home. Welcome home your Lutz. Yes. I could introduce you, but I think I would like for you to introduce yourself, because we want you to say what you want to say about yourself to the folks. But just let me tell you quickly a teeny something about each of them that I know. So Ron, he's always been the big brother in the family that I've grown up, because I've lived here for 45 years. And this is one of the very pioneering Black families in Lakewood that have been around. And he was always the big brother, and he went to college here at PLU. So over the years, I've just watched him rise and become very prominent in the social work area, social sciences area in this community, and he'll tell you more about his work. Philip, I've known since high school, because he came in a team. There used to be a team of folks, and they'll tell you more about it, that strategically went around the state recruiting Black students to go to college. And they were a team of admission officers that traveled around specifically looking for Black students to attend college. And so Philip was part of the team. He did not successfully recruit me to PLU, but I do want to introduce my admission counselor that is still in my life right now. This is Jesse Welch, and Jesse recruited me to WSU. But look now, we're full circle back to PLU. So.
And her boyfriend was there. That helped.
Ooh, he just had to bust the sister out, right?
I didn't want my former admissions colleagues thinking that I failed. No.
It wasn't
the power of the boyfriend.
Look, it wasn't academics, was it?
No, it wasn't. And I'm still in her life, and ask her where he is. Okay.
But I think
that's okay.
what is most profound is the Carolyn Peters story, and that really, many of you all know that I worked in the admission office for 10 years. And during that time, I was given the Los Angeles territory as part of my recruitment. And so when you take over territory, you get a list of where everyone has been before, and folks pretty much travel that path. But my title is also multicultural recruitment. So I'm looking at the list of where we're going, and we're in Los Angeles. And of course, that gives us all kind of opportunities to do multicultural recruitment in some way. So I'm sitting here trying to figure out how to be intentional about my work. Now, I'm looking at the list that's been given me. This is where you need to go with your time. And I'm going, well, I probably need to do something different if we're going to branch out into multicultural recruitment. So here I am in the parking lot, the Starbucks parking lot in Compton and California, which I knew we could figure something out. And I'm looking at my computer, and it says high schools in the area. And there's Centennial High School, there's Compton High School, and there's Dominguez High School. And so there was really no science about it. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna go to Centennial High School. So now as an admission counselor, you know, we're selling. We're out here on the road trying to put PLU's name out there. So I cold call walking into this school. I made it into the vice principal's office, and I got all my brochures, and we're a liberal arts school, and he's looking at me, and he says, I think Miss Peters went to PLU. And I looked at him, I said, well, no, I think maybe it might be University of the Pacific, or, you know, he had Pacific in his mind, but it wasn't the Lutheran. That's what I'm thinking. And I'm still talking, and we've got, doctors, and we make teachers, and he says, no, I think Miss Peters went to PLU. And he could see me looking at, like, who is this crazy man trying to make me think that this, and so he said, no, come on. So we got in his golf cart. I remember, because the school is so huge. He says, no, come on. We got in the golf cart. We drove out. We opened the door. And as big as day, it says Pacific Lutheran University on the wall. And he said, see, I told you she went to PLU. I told you. Now, mind you, she's teaching. And these two folks are standing at her door with all this ruckus, and she's looking out there, and he's going, I told you. Miss Peters, these your people. This your PLU. Your PLU people are here. Can you imagine? I mean, seriously, just like that, just random like that. And from that moment on, it's been 8 to 10 years that we've been together. And when we would hold receptions in Los Angeles, she would come out and talk to students about her journey at PLU. So there are no accidents, friends. You know, this is just the way the journey is. So I would like to turn it over to you all to introduce yourself and let folks know what you're doing right now, and then we want to get into some questioning about your journey. Okay, Carolyn, you want to go first?
Good evening. First of all, I'd like to thank Melanie and everyone that was responsible for bringing me here, and my son for coming with me, my oldest son for coming with me. I'm now retired as a teacher from being a teacher. I love retirement. We agreed. I love retirement, but I so love teaching. I was a physical education teacher as well as a science teacher. I taught life science, earth science, physical science, environmental science, biology, anatomy, physiology.
All of it.
All right, there's my crew over there. I loved working with young people. I coached. In that time, I had my children. They came to games with me. They loved it.
So they told you?
Oh, yeah, they enjoyed it. They really enjoyed it. My oldest son fell in love with the football coach. My youngest son, God rest his soul, he fell in love with the volleyball girls. But they traveled with me. They enjoyed it. I loved being connected with the students. My greatest joy was to see them get it, to say, I got that. Or you see it in their faces like, I got that. Or the Scooby-Doo, like the light came on. So I really enjoyed that. But what I enjoyed more so than that, teachers don't get a lot of thank yous. But maybe 5, 10 years from the time you had them, you see them, they're grown. You may not even recognize them, but they remember you. One thing my son can attest to, like, ooh, I hated you, Miss Peters. You were so mean. You were stern, you were hard, you were strict, but I thank you. And those thanks come so far and few in between, but when they come, they are so heart-wrenching.
Yes.
They almost make you cry. Some of them make you cry, and it makes it all worthwhile.
Amen.
I loved my job teaching. I'm happy to be out of it. And I can just relax, but I loved it. And my time here at PLU helped me to motivate through life. It helped me to become a better person dealing with different cultures. I grew up in Compton. I'm a product of Compton. And the demographics have changed so drastically. But I was able to deal with all the children because of being here. You know, I didn't expect anything but excellence from them. And for the most part, that's what they gave me. I had a rough time with some, but they knew what I expected of them. My biggest thing, like I told the classes today, I taught with integrity. I was a professional. I meant what I said, and they understood that. And a lot of that came from here. My mother was the greatest motivator. I'm the only girl of 3 boys, and my mother pushed me up here. You need to get off from under us. You need to find your own wings. You need to find yourself. PLU was not my first choice. Grambling was my first choice until I found out I had an aunt working there.
Not gonna do it.
Was not going to go to Grambling. But my mother wanted me to find my own path. And she pushed me. She said, you must be self-sufficient. You have to be secure in yourself and leave your life open. Explore new things. Meet new people. There's Barb and Kathy. We lived on the same floor our first year, which was the basement of Harstead. And we had a great time. Susie. Great people to meet. We're all connected by another friend that was my roommate, Cheryl Higashiyama Austin, who lives in Vienna, Austria. And I stay in contact with them, with Cheryl, and she tells me about you ladies all the time, which is great. That's a connection that I had here that continues.
Yes.
Some of your friends are just lifelong.
So hold on to that, because we're going to get deeper into that when we're talking about vocation and life. Philip, you were, was it the first minority recruiter that
No,
PLU, or
no, I wasn't. I was
who
the
was it?
second,
You
actually.
were the second.
Right. But I did come, as the program says, in 1972.
I'm a proud graduate of Pacific University in Forest Grove, Oregon.
The one I thought she would. No.
But I can tell you that similarly to Carolyn, the idea of getting out of the state of California now, Carolyn's from Southern California, but I was from the San Francisco Bay Area. Menlo Park, went to the $2 million white high school where everyone there who was white got all the kind of counseling they needed to go to all of the right places. Those of us who were of color in general and black in particular did not get that same attention, but I'm going to show you how the Lord will work. He said, you don't need Miss Gibson. You need to just do what you know you need to do, and that was listen to what your mother said. My mother said, boy, you better go to school, and you better not be arguing with those old white folks over there, and you better do everything you're supposed to do. Whatever that meant. You still had to figure that piece out, but you did it, and it was fortunate that it was a good match for me. But on that whole thing of vocation and your journey starting and when you realize things, what I realized on the second day at Pacific University, 2 or 3 things. One, I had never been around whites that had never been around blacks. So, wow, there are white people in this world who've never been around blacks. That was a revelation to me. But what I also knew was that I literally lucked out on the fact that my first choice school was my last stop. It was the right fit for me. And I promised the Lord and Martin Luther and anybody other who was important in those days to me that I would never let another black student accidentally stumble on a good match. Because it was too much money and too much time for them to be accidentally matched up well with their school. And I have not strayed from that area of student outreach to try to match their talent and ability with the best place for them. But I'm the third of 3 sons. I have two older brothers. I majored in speech, communication, and there at Pacific. Enjoyed my time there overall. It was a learning experience without a doubt. For sure, because I learned there just how limited other people's value set for black people really was. I learned how easy it is to fear people who are simply different from you, but then fail to understand that because you're different, others might fear you too. That wasn't a part of many of my colleagues' experience. But like here at Pacific Lutheran, you work through all those things, and it takes a special campus that can create, however inadvertently, in some instances, that kind of environment, and enough of it really is about the students. Faculty and staff, I think we're just kind of appendages in a lot of ways. We do some good, and in many instances, great good. But it's you, the students, who are going to create that environment day to day, in the dorm rooms and all of that stuff. That's really going to make the difference between someone who can understand what is the value that a place like Pacific Lutheran University can bring. Last thing I'll say before we move on is that one of the things that I liked so much about this place was it was never ashamed of its Lutheran connection. Now, I wasn't Lutheran then, and I'm not Lutheran now. I was Baptist born and Baptist bred, and when I'm gone, I'm Baptist dead, okay? But what I learned about the Lutherans was that they were absolutely comfortable in their space to the point where they would invite you to bring your faith with you or seek and find it, whatever it might be. That's huge for me. So in my time in admissions, I was always excited to simply share that one of the things that I loved about this place called Pacific Lutheran University, and notice I say the whole name because that's the way the presidents liked it, particularly President Ritchie. He rarely referred to us as PLU, always Pacific Lutheran University. And why? Because that's the name and that's the heritage and that's our birthright, and it gives you the freedom to seek wherever you need to go. And that is huge, young folk, because it makes this place different than, not necessarily better than, I never argued that point. It made Pacific Lutheran different from other schools, but I'm happy to say that that point of difference was better for many of the students then, and I would hope now.
No,
I
not
would
now.
hope now. I would hope
There's
now.
there's an argument or discussion going on campus on whether that L should be called Lutheran or not.
And I
So-
say continue to discuss that, but take it from me, gang, and you heard it here first. It still makes you a difference whether you believe it or not, because that's also the way that it works within the notion of Christianity. The Lord's not concerned about what you don't understand. The Lord's very, very much aware of what the Lord knows to be real, and that difference can be that point that will make it better
the
for you.
Lutheran heritage.
That's it. And if Gordon Lathrop were here, the campus chaplain, when I was here, and we'll talk about that a little later
Yeah,
too.
we can talk.
He's the one who made this place possible for a young Latino brother from Tacoma to be admitted to Pacific Lutheran as Tom Jones and to graduate Marie St. Thomas. Okay? That's a piece of what it means to, as Gordon Lathrop would say, to be engaged in that radical conversation that will force you to understand the humanity of every one of us. Now, whether some of his colleagues of the cloth agree with him or not, he was not concerned because it was nonetheless the truth. So just because you may not believe that it should be an L in your name doesn't mean that it ain't so. Next.
Awesome.
So you see why he was in admissions. Okay. My name is Ron Murphy, and class of 73. Came here in 1970. Actually spent my first year at Big Bend Community College in Moses Lake. And actually, I am one of the folks that came here as kind of an accident, if you will. I left Moses Lake because my best friends over there were completing their second year, and I was completing my first year. Anyone know about Moses Lake knows it's kind of out there. And I wasn't going to be just kind of out there. I didn't have transportation or anything like that, so it's like, I'm going to get my butt on out of here. Go back to Tacoma and let's see what's up. I played baseball at Moses Lake, and I was good enough to play baseball there. So I came here, tried out for the team at POU, got a scholarship. I wasn't a fantastic player or anything like that, but quite frankly, I wasn't concerned about baseball. I was more concerned about getting an education. Baseball was really a vehicle for me to get an education here, along with some other financial aid and stuff like that. As we get into it, though, I'm going to tell a different perspective altogether and all, because when I came here, what they're saying is not exactly what I was feeling. Yeah, it's not what I was experiencing at all. In fact, I really felt like the other. And many of my counterparts felt like the other as we came here and all. It's a very turbulent time, if you remember. Early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, Vietnam War, a lot of strife and contention here in the United States. All kinds of activism going on, black activism, Hispanic activism, American Indian activism, gay, lesbian activism. I mean, just all kinds of folks were really churning and really trying to make a way in this society. And coming to Pacific Lutheran or POU, I still call it POU, and I'm comfortable with that. Coming here to POU, POU was going through its own kind of little revolution, if you will, because all of a sudden you had these hordes, if you will, invading the campus, coming back from Vietnam, adults who were saying, I ain't living on campus. Shoot, I'm an adult. I've been to Vietnam, had to fight for this country and all, and you want me to live in one of these dorms? I'm not doing that. And that created a little bit of tension because, quite frankly, the university had been used to having people come live on campus and be fine with that and all. Mom and dad was paying for it and all that kind of stuff. But you had a lot of adults like myself, young adults, who were saying, no, I'm beyond that. That's not what I want to do. Had curfew on the campus, that was even changing when I first came here and everything and all. Mandatory chapel, all kinds of stuff like that was going on. And people were saying, no, don't want to do that anymore and all. And it was creating a lot of tension. But then you had folks, my color, other colors coming on campus, and that was creating this kind of tension as well. And it wasn't just total. I'm giving my perspective, by the way. Sure. I want to really emphasize that.
But it wasn't singular.
But it wasn't, it wasn't singular and all, and people were really coming here, and there's a lot of black folks that they stayed and they left, quite frankly, and everything, because it was very difficult for them to feel like they could fit here. But there were a lot of black folks that came here and felt like they could fit here and graduated and went on their way and have done well in life. Class of 73, as I said, I graduated School of Social Work or Social Work program here, went on to grad school at University of Washington, completed my master's there in 75. Excuse me, have been working in the field of social work since then, actually. And we'll talk a little bit more, but that's my vocation. That's what I really learned. But I want to also just point out a couple other things, in case folks don't know. Bantu is not just about a tribe in Africa. Bantu, we said, stands for Black Alliance Through Unity. That's what it was an acronym, quite frankly. A lot of people didn't know that and all. As I've bumped into people over the years and all, they just thought, well, we were naming it after a tribe from Africa, but that's not the case at all.
Bantu is the predecessor of what is now the BSU,
Okay.
yeah? Black Student Union.
So I also want to say that we had Larry Griggs. I think that was before you.
The multicultural affairs person.
When I came here, there was a guy named Tony Lister,
He was in admissions.
right? Okay, in admissions and all. Harold Gamble.
Yes.
He and I came the same year.
So there's been some wonderful people, and those are folks that I interacted with when I was here at POU early days and all. They were wonderful folks. They really provided some support, but they also help me understand, hey, you know, you got to really navigate through this campus, even though I had grown up here in the Tacoma area. So unlike maybe what you were saying, Phil, for me, associating with white folks, being around white folks was not foreign to me and all, but there was still a lot I had to learn because it was really another time that I walked into an environment where I didn't feel welcome. I lived over here in Lakewood and all. We had a cross burn on our lawn when I was a kid. I had Coke bottles thrown at me. I was called all kinds of names and everything, kicked out of a swimming pool right over in Lakewood when I was a teenager and everything and all. So I was used to that kind of stuff. That was during the day, Martin Luther King and all, you know. I was watching television and all and seeing people were saying they were Christians and all, and they had their white robes on and hoods on and everything, and I was saying, nah, You know, there's a lot of people who can be Christians, but not white folks. That's how I felt then, and that's the environment when I came here to POU. That was the mindset I had. Of course, as we talk, I changed that mindset.
Yeah.
It wasn't because of what I got taught here. It was because the Lord said, change your mindset. And I said, I'm going to do that.
But let me just clarify, though. I said I was surprised when I went to Pacific University to have been around whites who had never been around blacks. I didn't say I hadn't been around whites. I've always been around whites and stuff because that's the way it was in Menlo Park, California. We had the 6 black family to move in and all of that stuff. You know, so my experience is very much closer to where you come from. But I just never been around whites who had never been around blacks.
But the
been
other,
around plenty of whites.
Right, that's the part that was really a key part of what you said is that, excuse me again, whites not being around blacks and all. And that was kind of weird, quite frankly, and all, to come here to this campus and find folks that were, you know, just had never seen blacks on television. Some people were saying they had never seen blacks on television, stuff like that and all. So it just was kind of weird. But then as I learned, you know, some of the places that some of the white students were coming from, it just made sense. There wasn't really a black population where, you know, North Dakota or some parts of Minnesota.
Try being in Forest Grove, Oregon versus Tacoma, Washington. You know, this was nirvana. You know, we had no black churches. We had no black barbers. You know, I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. What do you mean I can't go around the corner to Mr. Harris's garage to get my hair cut? What? I got to ride the bus an hour into Portland to get my hair cut? I can't worship on Sunday? I'm not trying to. I went 4 years without hearing a Hammond B3 organ. You know, that's just ridiculous. You know, but anyway, what you make of it?
No, this is such important context, you know. And as I'm hearing you now, to some degree, I'm thinking you're talking about now, you know, for some of the things that are going on. With what you have lived and where you are now, what is the advice that you can give to our students about going forward?
One thing I would advise is for you to remember where you come from, who you are. That's the main thing that I would really say. You gotta hang on to that, because POU is not the only environment that you're going to go into where you're going to have to be tested, and that there's going to be fire in your life and everything and all. And if you're not grounded in, you know, your family values, whatever they may be, and things like that and all, then it's going to be extremely difficult for you, and you can kind of bounce around. So I'd say remember what grandma told you, what mommy and daddy told you. They can tell you everything that you need to know, but they've told you some good stuff, you know, and that's what I would say.
And what were y'all protesting back in the day? What were the issues of the day that you were actually on campus protesting?
Well, I'd like to hear the students' perspective, because I think staff, we always have a slightly different lens, whether we wanted to or not, but it was different from the students. Not that we weren't as aware of things going on, but I think it's so very important to hear the student sense of it, and then I'd speak to what I felt I sensed, saw, and worked on.
I think the main thing for me was the mandatory chapel. I was Methodist and didn't know about chapel. And having to go, a necessity to go, I wasn't feeling that. But I then started going, and I felt so out of place because at our church it was different. But then there was a connection because of my roommate, Cheryl. She was Lutheran, and I would go with her. Cheryl helped me that freshman year to navigate through everything. Bless her heart, she was the calm, I was the storm. And she helped me to navigate through a lot. And I needed her. And this man right here, oh my God, he helped me through more than Cheryl did because I was very mouthy. There's my sister right there. It was different. And just like Ron said, there was a lot going on. But I remembered, like he said, what my mom said, stay open, okay? One thing that you said that I agree with wholeheartedly, remember where you came from. I'm a product of Compton, like I said. When I graduated, I went back to Compton. I gave back to my community. I gave them 38 years of my life, and I enjoyed it. But I wanted to come back to Compton. I know you've all heard of South Central Los Angeles, okay? But it's not as bad as people would have you believe. Bless Cheryl's heart, she came to Alhambra, where her brother lived. And she says, I have to get in touch with Carolyn. Her brother said, you can't go to Centennial. They shoot people there. She said, she works there every day. And she's never once told me about a shooting. She said she was going to rent a car. He was petrified. So I said, I will come to you. And I did. But that was the mindset, okay? South Central is just like Beverly Hills, Torrance, Lakewood. You've got your good areas and your bad areas. There's some places in Beverly Hills I'm not going to go. Okay? But by the same token, people believe the same thing about South Central. And it's not that bad.
Parkland.
And I agree
Let's
with
keep that real.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, because one of the things that I tried to share with the students, not only here at Pacific Lutheran, but also at my alma mater, and that really is that because of what the students have said, know from whence you come, that's very important. But the other piece for me was for the black students in particular, but students of color in general, and then women also. You need to have a clear understanding of what your worth is. Amen. And I would say to some of them, the young brother from Compton High School who came, he's in one of the pictures back there, Wilbert Hawkins Jr., now Pastor Wilbert Hawkins Jr. I would tell him, because a number of the students would come into my office regularly with their heavy hearts in terms of things happening to them here. And I'd tell them, bottom line is that you have to understand your own self-worth. That's right. And why? Because every day you get up, there are people who are probably on a three-point stance to try to knock you off your game. Not just whites, but just other folks, envious other black people who think that you all that because you're at Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma, Washington, as opposed to you didn't go to UCLA. You didn't stay home and all that stuff, you know. I was ostracized for having gone out of state to college. When I would go home, a number of my classmates, they went to Southern Oregon College. I happened to be at Pacific in Oregon. But anyway, know your self-worth, because you have to be clear on what your value is. Because if you're not, then anyone other will be able to set that level for you, judge you by it, and keep you there. Now, you need to be realistic. No need for you to think that you're going to be some brain surgeon when you can't even multiply, add, subtract, or divide. So you must strive to really be real in understanding what that worth is, but you must know it. Because if you don't, then you'll fall for anything and stoop for even less. That's just the way that works. But to the first piece of your question, what might I suggest people think about? You really need to, within that concept of vocation and a vocation, you try to live in what I call that intersection between your greatest passion, whatever it is, and some of the world's greatest needs. Because if you will live at the nexus of those two things, then you can work 38 years and not worry about it, because you'll worry about the impact you have on others. And we've talked about impacts here. Your roommate, you're coming more aware of different things that you needed to do and making sure that you understood baseball was a fun little sport, but it was an extracurricular activity and it was social work. Keep those focuses, you see. But live within that intersection of your greatest passions and some of the world's greatest needs. And for me, it was back to the story I told earlier. I wanted to make sure that I didn't run across many, if any, black students who didn't clearly understand what they needed to know about where they were getting ready to go in terms of their schooling. Because if you can make your first choice your last stop before your BA, you're just in better position. I live in that intersection daily, and I'm glad about it. But my 3 years at Honeywell made it possible for me to live much more comfortably than all those other years in private higher education. But I live in that circle. And I need you to be clear on that. If you don't do anything else or remember anything else, that at least I say, you find what those passions are, and you figure out a way to live within that, within the context of your work, your volunteering. Make it all work together, because then it won't be difficult. It will be laborious, but it won't be difficult. I didn't know I was beat down at the last university I worked for 15 years until I left. I didn't know I was broke down, Sylvia. You know, I mean, I knew I did an awful lot, but I didn't know the impact that it will take. But you can't be committed and be comfortable. Those things don't go together. So if you're comfortable, then you're not committed. Now, again, does that sound like an oxymoron? Because, you know, you got to love what you're doing. Loving what you do will have you do more than you can physically do. And there's nothing comfortable about that. There's nothing comfortable about that. But welcome the satisfaction that it can bring if you cross your passions with the world's greatest needs. You'll be a happy person. You may be broke, but you'll be happy.
So you asked a question, what were we protesting? So for some of us, when we came here, it was more just the feeling of being ostracized. I'm not sure that we could always articulate it, but it was the feeling that somehow we were not welcome. The welcome sign was put out, it seemed like, for a lot of other kids that came here and everything, but it didn't feel like it was put out for us. You know, we could talk to different folks and they could talk about their heritage and all, and I agree, it was wonderful that some of the students here, you know, had a heritage where literally a grandparent or some relative, the building was named after them out here and all. That's wonderful, that kind of stuff and all. But it just didn't feel like it fit for us because there was not always that welcoming. Now, again, across the board, that wasn't the case. There were certain people that I think really tried to make things work for everyone that was coming here, in particular, the others and all. So I think that was one of the things that we were really trying to figure out. It's not right that we go into some classrooms and we have professors who are criticizing us and for some folks saying you don't belong here, just blatantly saying you don't belong here and all because you don't meet up to the educational standard or a whole lot of other things and all. We interpreted that as just racism, that's what was going on. There may have been a case where, you know, folks might not have had the kind of study skills that they needed, et cetera and all, but there was just some blatant remarks and statements that made us feel so unwelcome that we felt like the only way we could really survive was to band together. Start working with each other, supporting one another and everything. Was that happening across the board? No, not always, but it worked for the most part, where we really did feel comfortable. That whole thing, I just want to transition over to the vocation thing, because I think what you said is so wonderful, Phil. Coming here to PLU, I watched my parents all of my life serve others. That wasn't the language that was used in everything. It was just, they did stuff. Somebody in the family died, or they were sick. They made them feel comfortable. They helped them out. My dad was a wonderful cook and all. Somebody was getting married in the church, or there was a repast or something like that. Hey, call Mr. Murphy, maybe and they called on my dad. And made some gumbo and stuff like that, because my dad was just a wonderful cook and all. And my dad would cook for 10 people. He'd cook for 300-400 people and all. And I never ever saw him say, look what I did. I never saw that. My mom did the same thing. My mom passed away a few years ago and all. Up until she was about 86 years old, she was going to the nursing homes, reading the Bible, serving her friends who had to go into the nursing home and stuff like that. My mom did that and all. It was just a wonderful. Never heard my mom say, look what I did, or anything like that. So when I came to PLU, I really didn't understand it. I didn't really realize it, but I had a passion to serve. That's why I'm a social worker. And let me tell you, those of you that know anything about social work, either you have a passion for it and you can hang, like you're saying, or if you don't have a passion for it, you'll be looking for something else. I had other interests. I had other things that I was interested in, but that was my passion. That's what I really wanted to do, and that's what I've been doing in life. I'm not retired. I still work and all. I work for a philanthropic foundation. I've been doing that for a number of years and all, serving states. My territory is Washington State and the state of Nevada and all. I work with Las Vegas and Washoe County, actually, Reno. So, I would say that find out what your natural passion is. It might be business. It could be sports. It could be something else. Just find out what your natural passion is. And the place that you look for your natural passion is you go back to your family. Find out, because the family's going to tell you your story. And that doesn't mean that all of our families are, wonderful and stuff like that. But you're going to learn a lot from your family and all. So if you want to know what your passion is, you go back and look at some of the old folks in your family. You go back and you look at your parents. You look at your aunts and uncles, your cousins, what have you and all. And when you find somebody that is doing what you really like to do, you rely upon them. You talk to them and find out. I didn't have that automatic benefit in terms of talking to social workers, That just didn't, because I didn't have that. I didn't have anybody in my family called a social worker by title. But I had people in my family that did social work. Mm-hmm. They really serve people, and that's what I would say.
And Melanie, from a staff perspective, when the question was asked, what were students protesting about? If you're a good staff person, you don't wait to work issues that affect your students. So when you hear Ron and Carolyn speak to not particularly feeling welcome, then you as Black faculty and staff, you're asking the questions among yourselves. And we had a few, because we did have myself in admissions. We had Harold Gamble, Director of Minority Affairs. We then had a number of Black faculty persons, Dr. Tony Clark in social work. We had 2 Black faculty in Tony Clark in sociology. But Thelma Payne over time in social work, and Sheldon Thornby, and then there was a young Black woman Carolyn Marsh in legal studies. Had Shirley Aiken in the School of Nursing. She was preceded by Christine Miller, a Black woman in the School of Nursing and stuff. And then you had Carrie Milner, who was the Associate Director of Food Service. She led and ran the operation down at the lower campus in the building. I don't know if they still serve food down there or whatever. Yes, Columbia Center. She was there. We had Dr. Rodney Johnson, a brother, in the doggone sciences, who left here and went to work as the chair of the biology and chemistry departments at Howard University. But we would worry about what the students were concerned about. So, not feeling welcome, we started working with the existing structures on the campus to make sure that new student orientation was going to deal with the fact that you need to help students understand that they needed to see their face in this place. You see what I'm saying? So, or you'll talk with the faculty people. Some of my first experiences with, people can call it racism if they want. I looked at it this way. There were just issues around race that affected my white faculty colleagues more than it seemed to impact those of us on the administrative staff. We had to do a lot of work to work through it, but the challenges or the issues with the students were really more the challenges in the classroom. You heard Ron speak to whether or not having, faculty people make them feel, however inadvertently maybe, but not welcome. I had a young person, Carolyn, I don't know if I ever told you this, but I had, some of the women faculty in the physical education area where Carolyn was come and wanting to know what I was going to do about the fact that Carolyn didn't have her hand over her heart standing up, with the national anthem. So again, you don't just jam a person up. You use that as a teaching moment. I'm younger than most of them. Remember, I graduated from college at 21. I came here probably one of the youngest administrators and stuff. Handsome and cute and all that other stuff, ladies, okay? So people weren't trying to hear from some young upstart, period. Add the fact that you're black and then gay too and proud of it at a Lutheran school and remind them that God loved me too. That stuff was tough for us as staff. But your needs were more important than my challenges, you see. So we needed to make sure that they had teachable moments. And so my only question to her was, well, where were your eyes when you saw that she didn't have her hand over her heart? That's what you do. You flip the script, Why were you not being devout? And how many other students didn't have it? And if students who were not black didn't have their hand over their heart, who did you go to? Well, you could hear a rat piss on cotton because they hadn't done it. So we worked the issue with our faculty colleagues and staff when we needed to. Back to Melanie not having Centennial on the list of schools that were visited in Southern California. We certainly used to do it because I went there. Why? Because we knew, at least I knew, and my colleagues grew to know, that talent comes in all colors and both genders, or now I guess I can say all genders. I picked that slogan up as a staff person in the Office of Admissions here, because I was that clear, and people could not hear from Philip Minor on Pacific Lutheran University stationery without seeing that tagline, because one, it was just true. But the point is, you work hard to make sure that when all of your colleagues are going to travel, they're traveling to schools where they will likely see black and other students. One of the things we did for many years in the admission office, and I didn't get an answer from that with the colleagues there yesterday, we would write to the top 2% of black test takers through the National Merit Effort. Every year, we'd send it to the counselor at the high schools that we were visiting in admission. Because as the director of school relations in the admission office, I got to work with the dean on how we were going to cut up these doggone schools. So you're not visiting schools that don't have a respectable number of the top talented black students in this country. You couldn't go to schools in Oregon or in Southern California or in Idaho or wherever unless you were going to make sure that you included schools where there were at least some, including Federal Way, okay, where there were top African-American individuals. And I can tell you this, I did it at most of the schools I worked for, and rarely did the high school counselors in those schools even bother to tell those students that they were the top 2% black performers in the country. Right here in Tacoma Public Schools, in Spanaway Lake, and Burien, and Federal Way, and Seattle, and Bellevue, and all of that stuff. I didn't care that they didn't know because they knew, because they heard from me. Those are the battles that your faculty and staff will fight on your behalf. And we did it. And that's why the numbers grew, because it's all about intentionality. And so the question, you said what would we tell students? One of your other questions, what would we tell faculty and staff? Answer the question for yourself. What is your value proposition around diversity? And what is the evidence of that which you are doing in order to make it real here at this place called Pacific Lutheran University? And if you cannot answer that with some degree of clarity, and I would even argue immediacy, then you have work to do. You have work to do.
I'd just like to add to the black students, hold your head up. Ladies, hold your heads up. Roll your shoulders back and walk through here like the queens that you are. Gentlemen, the kings that you are. You come from a rich heritage. And instead of walking around with your head moping down, I think I drew attention to myself because I had an Angela Davis afro. It was out there. And I always had my head up, my shoulders back. But I was taught that. I was proud of who I was, who I am. Okay? And I guess I had that persona about me. When I walked through the campus, I had my head up, afro flowing. If it wasn't an afro, I had braids. Okay?
And didn't you pioneer? You were homecoming court and
I
cheerleader?
was the first black cheerleader, and I was the first on the homecoming court. Didn't win, but I had my afro. But I want you to be very prideful of who you are, where you came from. I don't care if you're black as night, brown, or as they said in the 60s, high yellow, okay? You know who you are. Hold your head up and your shoulders back, and remember you are from a rich heritage of very intelligent people. Know that you are important. You are the best. Put it out there. Let everyone know. If you're in the education department, the liberal arts, sociology, whatever department you are in, be the best in that department. It's not that you can't. You just have to put yourself out there. And all of you can do it.
Yes, you can.
So balance that out too with the fact that we're all on a journey, right?
Yes.
Life is a journey. It ain't no sprint, it's a marathon. And the reality is that we all come at different stages. Some will come here and will be all packaged and ready to go. And others, like you say, will be doing some work. I felt like I had a lot of work to do. Folks would look at me and think, man, he's got it together. But I knew internally I had a lot of work to do. And it's been a lifelong journey for me. And it's still work that I'm doing on myself. Not all about who I am in terms of my racial identity, but also about who I am as a man, who I am as a husband, who I am as a father, grandfather, sibling, uncle, et cetera, and all. So I'm still doing that work in my life. So don't think that you're going to come here to PLU and graduate after a few years and it's all done and all. No,
Check.
it's the beginning.
It is the beginning.
beginning.
I would like to, and being mindful of time, students, what do you want to ask? Is there anything that is on your mind to ask of the elders that have gone before you? Are you questioning, curious about anything? Because we can keep talking, but this is also for you. Yes. Being black men at PLU back in the day, how do you define, did you define your masculinity? How do you show up on campus?
Well, I had that big afro and all of that kind of stuff, and I thought I was all of that. That's how I define my masculinity, because that's how a lot of young men are taught to define our masculinity. But again, I've grown. And so I came here thinking one thing, I left here thinking another, and over the years, I have kind of matured into other aspects of who I am as a man. You know, I no longer have to play kid games. I'm not even interested in them. You know, I am a father. I'm an elder. I appreciate that language, in fact, because that's how I view myself, as an elder. And so, as an elder who is a male, I don't have to mess around with all of this other stuff that I was messing around with when I was 16 and 18 and 25 and the disco era and all. You know, I mean, all of that stuff that really. This is something, and I'm really being serious here and all. You know, if there's another thing that I could really say to you and all is, and I know it's hard. I know it's hard because you gotta experiment, you gotta do stuff in your life and all. But the things that can shackle you spiritually, physically, mentally, in all ways, drugs, alcohol, men, women, you know, what have you and all, I'd say, hey, really think twice about those things because they have long-term impact. The reality is that some will experiment and some will be able to move on from that experimentation. Some will not survive. So, you know, what I've learned over time is that why bother? You know, there's better things in life to do and all. Do those things that will uplift your spirit, your mind, your body, and others, and you'll have a very fruitful and productive life. That's how I look at it.
Those of us who were black and male on faculty and staff, and not that we were necessarily that much older than the students, because again, I came here at 21, and so, I mean, Ron was right behind me, you know, and here it is on paid staff and all that, you know. So it was an interesting line to walk for us, because we were young enough to still be able to run with, you know, some of the brothers and the sisters for that matter, I suppose, although it's not something that one should do. But we tried to make sure that we conducted ourselves as black men in ways that would make sense to the young black male students. And then we sought opportunities to try and make sure that our black men and our black women would get to know one another outside that notion of a romantic potential relationship. And so the Black Student Choir, the Black Lions Student Unity Choir, was a huge solidarity piece. And from my vantage point as a slightly older black male, the issue was, and I directed the choir, and our pianist was Reginald Pearsall, right here, a student from Goldsboro, North Carolina, okay? And I tell you, our expectation was that there was going to be all of the due respect that brothers should afford the black women students. That was going to happen. And they did. It created opportunities outside the dating dynamic for folks to get to know one another. Now, whether that was necessarily a positive in its outcome or not, from our vantage point, it looked like it was. I hope it was all right. You know, many people seem to be as much familiarly connected through those kinds of opportunities as anything other. I also would say that I think the coaches we had here, they were pretty no-nonsense too, and a number of the black males were on the football team and then in basketball, and then Ron played baseball. There was an expectation that you weren't going to be just cutting up just willy-nilly and be a student athlete at Pacific Lutheran University. That wasn't going to happen. But the easier way to make sure that the brothers were doing what they needed to do was to make sure that the sisters knew that you don't have to deal with their stuff when they fall short, okay? Carolyn, to tell you, our choir would sing out at Fort Lewis and McCord Air Force Base, and a number of the students were old enough, we could get into the Ace Deuce Trey Club, and I could hit it too, all right? But what was the rule? If 15 of us are going, the same 15 are going home, okay? Ain't gonna be no mixing and matching. So, if you all understand, I wasn't trying to be hard on the sister, but no, y'all going home with the same people who brung you. You know, okay, now what you do after we get you back to campus is your issue. But don't be in a hurry to try to hook this thing up any differently than when you came, because it wasn't that kind of party. Okay, and so we, as black male faculty and staff, we needed to make sure that those kinds of lessons were necessary, were learned. And I had no problem in pulling people aside to deal with them falling short on XYZ. I just didn't. Now, being gay within this mix, in some ways maybe added a slightly different wrinkle, because, you know, I didn't want the brothers to thinking that just because that's where I was coming from, that they were on my list, because they weren't on my list, you know. That wasn't it, okay? But anyway, and I ain't mad about it, sisters. I think every sister ought to have a brother, both my first love and my current one, 32 years, thank you very much. You know, I'm not. But you understand that there's a responsibility to be male, and you then have to live that. You have to walk that. You have to place that as an example. I have 8 grandkids. My 2 oldest grandkids are college graduates. The oldest one will probably do a master's here at the University of Washington. Our first granddaughter just finished from Boston University, and she's working in a PR firm, in New York. And so you don't have to be a straight male in order to be a good role model, as a male. I have 2 sons. My oldest son is 47. My youngest one is 41. He's still dancing with Cher. If you see a light-skinned brother who's dancing with Jamal Story, that's my boy, okay? And my oldest son is a school teacher in Jacksonville, Florida, lawyer by training. So we can have all kinds of successes if you understand, as Ron was suggesting, that you move away from your childish ways when you cease to be a child. We expected that of the black men here, and I think, generally speaking, use your term, that's what we expected, and that's what they gave us. And that's what they gave us.
So your question is, what are their thoughts on religion in the curriculum? Religion is part of the curriculum.
I said earlier that I kind of had a hard time viewing white folks as being true Christians because of my perceptions. I remember walking to the administration building. In fact, I called out here yesterday and I said, is that sign still up there, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom? Because I used to see it and I scoffed at it. I was like, out here, these folks playing like they, well, there's a couple exceptions. Jens Knudsen, biology teacher, he probably was an exception. Well, Eugene Wigman, he kind of opened up the doors to bring a lot of folks in. Maybe he was an exception, but there wasn't too many more. But this is how I really felt about it. It wasn't so much the study of religion. Now, I have no problem. I think that should be a part of the curriculum here. But I was more influenced by the Spirit of God. And coming here and having the views that I had against a whole group of people, God really challenged me over time about that. It wasn't here that I felt really challenged. It was years later when I came to Christ. That's my belief. When I accepted Christ and everything, I saw that, man, I wrote off a whole group of people. Whole group of people. Because, they're stupid in every group. Just like there is beauty and wonderment and kindness and integrity in every group and all. And so, that's part of my journey. Now, you're right. We're living in a time where I got a lot of internal struggle around this evangelical thing because they were the Bob Joneses and the Southern Baptist Convention and all of that kind of stuff that I talked about wearing the hoods and stuff like that when I was a kid. I don't know about anybody else, but that's who the evangelicals represented. But I was listening to NPR not too long ago, and they were saying, it's really interesting because the evangelicals, a long time ago, many years ago, 100 years ago, whatever, a couple hundred years ago, they actually were the ones that were really spearheading freeing the slaves and being involved in other kinds of ways and all. So it's just an interesting kind of thing. We're living in a very interesting time where I think God's Spirit is really moving a lot of people to be different and do something different and all, instead of playing church.
If I may, like you said, God's Spirit is moving. If you remember, it says God is love. And the only way that you're going to understand is, as the Bible says, study to make thyself approved. So you need to have some way to study. As a young adult, you probably wouldn't even pick up the Bible unless someone directed you to do that. And as you start reading this Bible, you're going to learn things. You're going to want to learn more. And as you become an adult, just like Ron said, you change your thought pattern. God is love. God doesn't see color. God sees people, the goodness within, okay? And you have to make a conscientious decision as to what you are going to believe. You have to know who you are. And I just want to go back to what Phil was saying about the black males. Ladies, if you demand respect and you carry yourself respectfully, the men will respect you. You must be a lady at all times. You must carry yourself like a lady. If you want someone to respect you, then you demand respect.
I think with regard to the question on religion and whether it ought to be mandatory, I think it's important for us to, well, it's important for me that people understand that you really need to try and separate the notion of how we as men and women live out what our understanding of religion is versus what religion really can be and in my opinion, is intended to be. Because I think that we fall short in our practice more than it's an imperfect science or a humanity or an art or whatever one calls it. I think that if done right, the study of religion in all of its many forms, and whether you're looking at Old Testament or New Testament, scripture interpretation, whether you're looking at it as a great literary piece, whether you're trying to understand whether or not that which we're called to do via scripture is how we're living out in life, there's some roadmaps in there that you can use. And like anything other, I don't remember reading any of the math books when I studied all the different years of math I did, where I took every single thing and used it. You pick and you choose. I think religion and philosophy can be that way. And I can tell you, the university I went to was United Church of Christ, United Congregational Church, rather. They dropped the course requirements my sophomore year, and they dropped mandatory chapel my freshman year. But they still required us to have to go to certain kinds of expansive thinking experiences, and it was what you all used to call the lecture and convocation series. And so the institution was very intentional about the kinds of lessons you can learn in any kind of an educational exchange setting. I guess said another way, they just tricked us because so many of the people in the lecture convocation series, they really were very learned theologians and scholars, of the great book, however you want to refer to that. So there's much that can be learned. But it is for you to incorporate it and then hopefully use it ultimately to the greater good. But I don't think that you lose much if you are in a well-taught philosophy or religion class any more than I think you lose much if you decide you're going to take an interesting course that might not be a requirement in social work, but might indeed give you the kinds of tools that will make you a more effective physical education teacher. So just look at it as another body of academic knowledge that you might be able to use on your journey. I would submit that you cannot have a passion, a true passion, unless there's something in there that doesn't get explained easily. And those things that are not explained easily are usually those things that you'll find in Scripture or within that context of religion, that unexplainable thing, you see. So I think there's great value in it. So I say, don't get all whatever about whether they're going to require it or not. Because guess what? You go to the movies and you go to sleep. Hell, go to your doggone chapel and go to sleep. I don't understand what the problem is. I used to love it when we sat in art missions literature. 3 times a week, there's a parade on campus. Students moving from the main campus across the street to Trinity Lutheran Church. Every time I went over there, I got fed. And I don't mean food. I don't mean food. There are lessons in that. Let me just say this to that. I lost my mother just earlier this month. And I've always tried to be somewhat religious, I thought, and reasonably good at it and all that other kind of stuff. But it's not until I saw my mother take her last breath that I could richly understand that which you will read regularly or hear consistently in almost any church or synagogue, and that is, he is worthy to be praised. It has a whole new meaning. So I can only suggest to you, don't miss out on another set of pearls of wisdom just because it comes in a class that says religion or philosophy, and who wants to do that and whatever? Well, a whole lot of you used to, because those students who would double major and or triple major here, philosophy and religion was in it. Whether they were in math, whether they were in music, whether they were in physical education, in sociology or social work, and guess what? If it worked then, I would submit to you, it can work now. That's my point, okay? So I say keep those classes. And chapel. I don't care if it's not
Well,
mandatory.
look,
You don't have to go if you don't have to, but there's nothing wrong with it being present. Because we as people of color would say, we don't care if you don't come to a doggone soul food dinner, but we have a right to present it. So how are you going to turn around and try to say you don't have a right to present another option? Oh, no, come on, get a mitt and get in the game, gang. No. No.
So
Just
I would
one
say,
person's opinion.
I would say, Phil, tell us how you really feel.
Oh, the real point that I need you to say, because I know all of you have been seeing this, never pick your socks in a poorly lit room. Because, yes, my socks are blue and my slacks are black. Okay, I had to say that because I said I know the front row is checking it out. Okay?
That's so
So let
funny.
me bust y'all out right
So,
now, okay?
this is funny.
I know they always pick your socks in a well-lit room. That's what I'll tell you.
So one of the things that I did hear in terms of just standing strong, believing in yourself, believing who you are, some of the things, students, that you're facing today that didn't evolve back in the day, just gender questioning and, you know, how those roles are fluid now, and what remains at the root, though, is respect for yourself, respect for who you are, standing up for who you are, and being strong in that. So that would translate to now, as, you know, some of those roles before, you know, be a lady, act like a lady, those roles are changing. You know, we begin to question those. So be who you are and act as who you are, and stand strong in respect for yourself. So,
Melanie, that because of all of the clubs and committees that are here, one of the things that we encourage the Black Student Organization to do, and I can talk a little more freely now, I didn't necessarily say these things out loud then, was we called it, Harold Gamble and myself, Project Engagement. We wanted Black students to have a position on every single committee that made a decision at this place called Pacific Lutheran University. Now, what we would say to them is, it's Project Infiltrate. So you're worrying about what ASPLU is spending their money on. Why are you worrying about it? You need to be on the doggone committees and direct where the money goes. So when we had Black History Month here, we had like 13 different major speakers and stuff. You know, it's the shortest month of the year. But we didn't pay for much of that. Why? Because we also link with our resources in the community. Another thing I wanted to say, and some of our community people are here in all. But we went to them. We got money from our Black businesses that were part of the business 8A set aside. We got money from Lecture and Convocation Committee. We got money from ASPLU. Heck, if they can bring Bill Withers and the Temptations and all these other, they can bring Asa Hilliard from Oakland, California. They can bring Hatcher, the mayor of East Chicago, Illinois. They can bring Alvin Poussant from wherever in the hell he was at Massachusetts. Where was he? Where was he, Jesse? One of those top, Harvard, there he was. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? We can do it, and that's what you need to do. Don't let a school year pass where you don't have a Black student on every decision-making body at this place. And they still probably have student representation on the Board of Regents. Usually it's the ASPLU president. Well, then be the ASPLU president. Hello.
yes. And but what I do want to recognize is that our ASPLU president is here. This is Hayden. And Hayden has been very, very intentional in doing what you're actually saying to make sure that there is ASPLU student representation, and even not if they're involved in ASPLU, just going to different parts of the community, letting them know what vacancies are available, and really encouraging. And for that, you know, we give you that, Hayden. Thank you so much. And Carson. There's a question. Malcolm had a question. What's your favorite album?
Favorite album, and my second question was, how did y'all have like self-care stuff? Because I know there was a lot of tragic events going on. I know the Medgar Evers thing hit me pretty hard. So how did that? How did y'all find self-care in those spaces at those times?
Okay, succinct answers.
Yeah.
I think it was Stevie
succinct
Wonder
answers.
and
Your
the-
album and
Stevie
self-care.
Wonder
Huh?
and the something of life. His
Songs in the Key of Life. Songs in the
Sounds
Key of Life. Stevie
That was
Wonder.
mine.
And then self-care.
We just were a family.
For me, Bloodstone's Natural High.
Ooh.
Reach for the sky and a natural
Name that tune.
All right, Natural High. Just because y'all selling marijuana in this state now, that ain't what I'm talking about, okay? I ain't talking about that. But, and what was the other one? Oh,
Self-care.
Self-care. It really was trying to deal with the organizational activities that would link our black students together. Because if you know one another, then hopefully you will treat one another the way that you want to be treated. But the other piece was it might facilitate group study, which definitely can facilitate graduation in what? 4 years. That's why they call it a 4-year degree, okay? Hello.
Okay. Favorite
So,
album?
yeah, I can't think of a favorite album, but I'll tell you, my background is, I love different kind of rock music, and I love, what we call the R&B soul music and everything. So that's the kind of stuff that I listen to and all. And it kind
Self-care?
of self-care for me was really depending upon other students here, but also going back to my family, depending upon my family to help out with stuff and all.
Okay. So I'm going. Oh, Nene? Theater department. Yeah, was there any involved in theater, any black
I don't
students?
remember anyone, but it's funny you mentioned that and all because I became involved in theater later on after I left PLU and actually helped start a black theater group here in Tacoma at one point. And also, it's funny that you asked, and Bill Beckvar, who is over the theater department during that time, was one of the co-producers of the Tacoma Actors Guild, but he helped our group Indaba, another African name, Indaba. Yeah, I was one of the founders along with Dr. Joy Hardeman Peskins and Mickey Satterwhite and a whole bunch of other folks and all. So I wish I would have learned some of the more technical aspects here, but it just wasn't in my line of thinking when I was here and all. So if it's something you're interested in,
She's majoring in.
oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
During Black History Month, we were a part of the theater, the production that they put on. They allowed us to do an African dance. And that was during Black History Month, so that was very important.
Right, so Bill Beckvar was a good name. There was another gentleman, Bill Beckvar was tall and thin, and there was a Bill something other who was short and a little fuller. And they would work with our black, they were constantly trying to get more black students to be engaged there. But then also Virginia Eamon in speech, and there were a number of students who did go on and do a few things there. But really the music department probably would be the closest in that kind of a performing area because we had such talented students with Reginald Pearsall, a music education person. Very, very talented here. Joanne Richardson, the #1 music student from Milwaukee, Oregon and everything, went on and, what's the church, Riverside in New York, she's minister of music there. And so it's tough. Andre Flynn from Alaska, another brother with a rich baritone voice. And then the Candace and the Bryant sisters, Candace and Gwendolyn, Gwendolyn did the piano and Candace did the piano, whichever way, one of them. Super talented.
They remember
So
everybody.
we had all of that kind of stuff going on. Well, Candace is a good teacher, social work and all that stuff too. Gwendolyn, I can't remember. Music teacher. Okay. So yeah, so those areas were very well represented. And then of course we had the Black Alliance Through Unity. What was the name of our little performing group, Carolyn? The Voices of Unity. We would sing.
Voices of
Carolyn
Unity.
and I would dance and everything. Oh yeah, we had it going on. We traveled all around the doggone state and made a little money.
So you see the activism that was happening.
Fully aware
that they were
of
very
what was
busy.
going on because of the black students who were here, and we linked them with us every opportunity that we had.
Reggie, didn't you play the Hammond and all that kind of stuff? Piano.
Played the piano.
All I remember, I didn't recognize you. I apologize for that. But all I remember was that you were fantastic around that
Yep.
and all. It
And
was
he
just,
still is. He still is.
and I always appreciated that big leather satchel that you carried around.
But he did make arrangements for us to have the Hammond B3 a number of times when we did our Black History Month performances. And one of them over in Eastville, one of the choirs from Minneapolis came down the House of Refuge. And baby, those folks will sing, they would sing till God got the news. They blew the speaker system over in Eastville. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. Come on, sister, help me with it. But they turned it out. But we really would work that. We would work it. Our choir was just wonderful. We got invited all kinds of places, sang for the Lutheran Women's over and wherever we had to drive, over there to Aberdeen or somewhere, got lost. But we got there in time to still perform. The Quarter Deck Restaurant right up the street there. You ask those folks who would turn it out, because we always had to march in.
I'ma jump
Single
in.
file. Oh, baby, I
He's getting excited, and so I'm just gonna jump in right now on this excitement so that we can bring it on home, bring it to a close, but we'll still be around to chat. It was just super important for you to hear from your elders. Okay, sometimes it may feel like you're tired, and we hear the voices of the collective. We hear your voices on our surveys to say sometimes you don't feel like you belong. And it's important to know that you have a history here at PLU, Black students. And in the back is an attempt from Nene to collect that history in one space. And then we've invited people back because Carolyn brought her scrapbook. And so now we have some more stuff to fill in our history because she has some photos. She's got some original photos that are not the copies of the photos that are excited, and we've got some more photos. Yeah, so just putting it out there to say that it is a desire for us to know our history, and I'm saying this out loud because this is true. We got a call, Sergi and I got a call from in the community when they saw the poster and that we were doing Black History at PLU and screaming about it, and these aren't the right people to represent us, and what do they know, and who is this? And I mean, it was a very uncomfortable call this week for us to take it and field it and deal with it. And one of the main claims was that we were trying to whitewash PLU's Black history because they saw on the flyer that it said a culture of inclusion, and their perspective was PLU was not inclusive, and you're bringing people back just to say that everything was wonderful and we didn't have any problems. And I don't think that we said that today. I think what we said is that it is what it is, and people have had their experiences, and that we're open and willing to grow and move forward as Lutz. I see Prentice in the back. Bishop Prentice Johnson is football back in the day, PLU. And see, look at that. Philip remembers that he recruited him from Stadium High School. But we have a very rich history in our community and a very rich Black history at PLU in Los Angeles and California and in many places. So let's just hope that we can look back on this like the Sankofa bird does, look back. But now looking forward, we're looking over here because you are our future. Look back. You come and shake the hand and touch your elders and say hello and look in the eye. But then we know and we have the comfort that this is our future. And we are all Lutz. And so to the Wild Hope Center and Sergia and Larry, and advancement folks and that work hard to, get everything funded. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about it, to talk out loud about being Black at PLU. We don't get to do that very often. Yep. And two, we have a diversity center now, and very active, and we have a dean of inclusive excellence now, and we have our Center for Gender Equity now. I mean, there are lots of things that are going on to just bring it all together. And so to you, we say thank you for your pioneering efforts. Thank you for the roots that you've built, and thank you for coming home. Thank you. So, if you have something to add to the history, if you remember somebody or some name, or if you remember something, you got to let us know. I think, Nene, did we bring the stickies? We'll go get it. If you've got something to add that you don't see in those decades, let us know so we can continue the research, because our hope is to digitize this and really make it something special for PLU. All right. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.